Game day's here, I can hear the crowd. Turn on the lights, fans are cranked up and loud. Red or blue, we wear it proud. Yeah, we love our teams in this border town. Chiefs and Royals, Boo Mizzou, Rock Chalk, Jayhawk, KU. Hear that drum pounding in your feet. Yeah, you're marching to the beat of KC.
What is going on, YouTube? What is going on, Kansas City? What is going on, Jayhawk Nation? And what is going on, everybody? And welcome to the beat of KC. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Lucas Murphy. Holy smokes, ladies and gentlemen, the Kansas Jayhawks absolutely rebound. They redeemed themselves inside Allen Fieldhouse after one of the most embarrassing losses in the Bill Self era to a Cincinnati Bearcats team that they had absolutely no reason to win that basketball game. They had no reason to win in the fashion that they did. But Kansas absolutely responds in one of the most impactful ways on one of the biggest nights in college basketball, which is known as Big Monday, and we're going to talk about all that. But ladies and gentlemen, the Houston Cougars looked absolutely decimated, and we're going to talk about that. Really, in one of the biggest matchups in this conference, really kind of that's been on the calendar, highlighted for a long time, came to fruition, and the Kansas Jayhawks again would come out victorious 69-56. They hosted the Houston Cougars on Big Monday inside the hollowed confines of Allen Fieldhouse, and once again the home crowd witnessed what I consider and what many consider the Fieldhouse magic in full effect. It's like when you truly need home court advantage, not only do the students show up, not only do the fans show up, but there's this weird presence, this magic that comes about when big games happen to come into Allen Fieldhouse, specifically on Big Monday. Both teams entered this contest at the top of the Big 12, only sitting behind Arizona. Houston was perched at number 2 in the league, and Kansas was lurking immediately behind them in third. Ladies and gentlemen, this again just shows you how big of a significant loss it was to Cincinnati at home. And I think, again, that's going to be one that you're going to look back on and truly question what was going on. But they, again, responded and really decimated a Houston Cougars team who has now lost 3 in a row. They lose to Iowa State, they lose to Arizona, they come to Kansas, and they lose. We're going to talk a little bit more about that too. So how the game played out? Really, from the opening tip, both teams struggled absolutely from again, the opening tip-off. They could not find a way to score. I think at one point we had 9 points at the 10-minute mark. I mean, both teams were just struggling. And really what that tells me is a lot of things. It tells me that the longevity of the season has started to catch up in some aspects. The continuous strength of what the Big 12 schedule provides every team in the Big 12 really is reflected in this game. Both teams knew how important this game was. They did, for seeding purposes in the postseason, for seeding purposes going into the Big 12 tournament. There was a lot of implications going into this, and really some records, you could say, that were kind of being challenged. The Jayhawks would hold the Cougars to just 56 points. And yes, I think a lot of that is contributed to some of the defense and really the game plan that Bill Self briefly had to prepare for, really in a limited amount of time. I mean, they play on Saturday at noon, and they're turning around immediately on Monday, playing in prime time at 8 p.m. And so he really didn't have a ton of time to prepare. But the defense, paired with the fact that I think the crowd, I think just how Houston was just not shooting the ball at all. I mean, we're going to really talk about that too. But again, they held a team with 56 points. It is pretty incredible, especially the Houston Cougars, who are averaging a much higher, rate than what that was. Kansas really had a balanced attack with multiple players contributing on offense and again on the defensive side. And I think to really go a little bit deeper, the rebounding. For a team that is known for their physicality in the Houston Cougars, they're extremely physical. And Kansas kind of really flipped the script on them in that aspect. And I felt Kansas really out-hustled them. I feel like Kansas was more physical. It was very noticeable on the rebounding aspect of it, really driving to the basket and getting fouled and going to the free throw line, which Kansas dramatically outshot, from the free throw line, the Houston Cougars. Houston normally is one of the Big 12's most efficient offensive teams. They struggled to find that consistent offense really from the half court. And I think that's really how Houston is designed. We talked about it in the pregame. Houston likes to really slow things down. They like to take a lot of time off the shot clock, and they're pretty efficient from shooting, specifically from the three-point line. That just was not really there in the cards for them tonight. Kansas really pushed the pace at times. They really forced Houston to get out of their game style, and that really kind of changed how Houston was really shooting the basketball. And I think when you really look at the Big 12 standings and the historical notes to this game, this win was more than just another conference victory for Kansas. It continued a remarkable trend in Allen Fieldhouse. Head coach Bill Self improved to a 41-0 on Big Monday. Ladies and gentlemen, just let that kind of settle in. Let that sink in just a little bit. He has improved to 41-0 on Big Mondays. You got to think about the teams and how that stage is typically set up for Big Mondays. They're playing good competition a lot of the time. He's 41-0. That's incredible. And that's the home court advantage. That's Allen Fieldhouse. That's the magic that comes with it. I mean, you got to think about all the former players that were in the house for this game. The Morris twins. I think Thomas Robinson was there. I mean, the list goes on and on and on of players that came back to really kind of provide support for this team. Additionally in the Self era, Kansas improved to 139-24, and that comes after a loss. So they lost to the Cincinnati Bearcats, but typically the Kansas Jayhawks find a way to respond, and they do improve to 139-24 after a loss. Again, another pretty impressive, record coming off of a loss. Underscoring the program's really their resilience and ability to respond after those setbacks. And boy, was the Cincinnati Bearcats a setback. Now for Houston, this is pretty decimating to them. The defeat marked their third straight loss, the longest slide the program has experienced in nearly a decade. Combined with recent defeats to, like we said, Iowa State, Arizona, and obviously now Kansas, it signaled that even top teams in the Big 12 can hit rough patches against elite competition. And those three teams in a row, I mean, you're bound to lose. And I don't necessarily predict that Houston was going to lose all three of those games because Houston is a very talented team. Again, heading into this, before this game, they were ranked the number 2 team in the nation. Now they obviously coming into this game, they were ranked number 5 after the adjustments because they lost those 2 games before this game. But it just shows you the gauntlet that the Big 12 is and why I believe personally, and many people believe, the Big 12 is the best conference in college basketball. It's just extremely tough. Now comparing the performances, the Kansas Jayhawks, they really had the home court advantage. The student section lined up immediately following what felt like the Cincinnati game. They were prepared to start camping out and staging a massive, really kind of showing for this game. They know the magnitude of this game. Kansas leaned into the strength at Allen Fieldhouse, where the Jayhawks have long enjoyed rare losses and intense crowd support. And I think one of the big things is they had balanced scoring. Typically, you would anticipate some of your premier guys stepping up, and a few definitely did. But Flory Badunga was just non-existent from a scoring perspective. Now, again, he contributed mightily in the rebounding stuff, which we'll talk about. But you really got some key contributions off the bench. You really saw Trey White step up in a massive way. But I think when you really even kind of look at this, the defensive focus, the Jayhawks defense held Houston well below its usual scoring totals, which we talked about. And I think that is in part, again, due to the defense, but also the fact that really just Houston didn't have any offensive rhythm. The Cougars, their offense struggled mightily, absolutely struggled. And I think a lot of that was the fact that it was, in Allen Fieldhouse. They were just unable to find consistent shots. They didn't have anybody really step up in a big way. And I think that's a big thing. And we'll really talk about a few players, and typically you anticipate some of those players to have just massive games, and they were abysmal. In a market that never sleeps, one name rises above the rest. Lisa Miller from Dan Lynch Real Estate, trusted by hundreds and recognized across the Midwest. She delivers results when it matters the most. With over 13 years of experience, and licenses in both Kansas and Missouri, Lisa isn't just selling houses. She's helping you find a place to call home. Whether you are a first-time home buyer, looking to upsize, or selling your current home, Lisa makes the process smooth and stress-free. As a local expert passionate about building lasting relationships, she ensures her clients feel confident and satisfied every step of the way. Don't wait, your perfect home is just a call away. Contact Lisa today at 913-579-3246 or 913-369-3000 or visit lisamillersaleskc.com. Let Lisa Miller at Lynch Real Estate help you start your next exciting chapter. And let her know the beat of KC, Lucas Murphy, sent you her way. The 3-game slide, the Cougars' losing streak is now extended to 3. It is the first of that length since 2017, a notable statistical footnote in really Kelvin Sampson's era. In the high-profile matchup coming off other tough losses in the Big 12, Houston's recent stretch highlights the challenge of just maintaining elite offense against top-tier defenses. They've gone through the gauntlet. They've played teams that really have good defense and really different styles of play, and they've had to adjust in each one, and they've come up short in all three of those games. Now, when you look at individual players, and I think this is really where the box score tells you the story. Trey White, ladies and gentlemen, he's been, as of late in some major games, he hasn't really shot well from the 3. He's gone silent on what he's really good at, and that's driving to the hoop, getting to the free throw line, taking some key jumpers. He really kind of disappeared in a few games, but ladies and gentlemen, he stepped up in a massive way in this game. 23 points on 6 of 9 shooting and a perfect 8 of 8 from the free throw line. He would find it from the arc, as we said, tonight, hitting 3 of 4 in some big situations. And for me personally, and I've said this when I interviewed Kyle Collier from 810, we're not asking, Trey White to go out there and shoot 7 to 10 3-pointers. That's just not what you're expecting from him. You need for him to at least hit 2 to 3 good 3-point shots. And that really kind of turns and sways at times, how this game or a game is going. And in this case, Trey hit some big time threes in some situations to really kind of flip the momentum. He also chipped in 5 rebounds, anchoring Kansas's offensive flow and really the consistent scoring punch, again, in key moments. His efficiency, especially at the line, helped Kansas extend leads and keep the pressure on Houston late, because there were times where Houston tried to kind of claw their way back into this game and they just could not do that. Bryson Tiller, ladies and gentlemen, it's when the big lights shine, Bryson Tiller is going to be there in a big way. Now, early on in this game, it felt like Bryson Tiller could not figure out how to handle the ball. I think he turned the basketball over 3 or 4 times. But ladies and gentlemen, he flipped that switch. He contributed 11 points, 10 rebounds. He really provided that physical play that you expected from a Houston Cougars team. Instead, it came from a Bryson Tiller. He really provided that inside presence, complementing the perimeter scoring. His presence on the boards and really his physical toughness helped Kansas win the rebounding battle and control the second chance opportunities, which I was in fear of. I was scared that they were going to get a ton of second chance opportunities, which would really allow them to kind of take advantage. And Kansas just eliminated that aspect. Now, Darren Peterson, ladies and gentlemen, you would expect a moment like this. This is the big stage. This is where you would expect a guy that's anticipated to go number 1 overall in the draft to have one of his most impactful games. And granted, he scored 14 points and created a lot of offense with his ability to attack the rim and kind of draw the attention from the Houston defense and find shots in traffic. And again, to me, what's so impressive about Darren Peterson is he scored 14 points, but when you look at the box score, you think, man, he had, just off the 14 points, you would think, man, he had one of the most impressive, runs. No, he actually really didn't have a great night. He shot 5 of 14 from the floor, was 2 of 7 from the 3. I mean, that tells me right there that he just wasn't in tune, wasn't really locked in. But ladies and gentlemen, he finds a way to score 14 points, and that's what makes him so unique and why a lot of people, even though the injuries lingering, he's having, sickness, whatever it may be, there's still that ability to just play the game of basketball. And that's what's most impressive about Darren Peterson. Now, when you look at the bench, and typically Bill Self, as of late, has gone 7 to 8 deep. That's about it. Jamari McDowell and Marco Jackson continue to provide enough off the bench. You're not asking those guys to go out there and be star players. Jamari McDowell hit a clutch 3, and Marco Jackson, although he doesn't necessarily always contribute in a high manner on offense, he plays extremely good defense. And that's what him and Jamari McDowell provide you off the bench is good minutes. They're not going out there and they're not, again, playing to an extremely high level. They do just enough to what they need to do to relieve some of those guys, to allow them to get breaks. You're not dropping off a tier when those guys come in. And Bill Self has perfected when to put certain guys in situations. And I think that's really why this team is starting to kind of, again, take off in a lot of aspects. Overall, Kansas's performance, they shot 44%. You wouldn't think that when you saw the first half. It was atrocious for both teams, ladies and gentlemen. And Kansas would hit 7 of 17 from the three-point line. Critically, Kansas dominated from the free throw line, and I think that's where they really kind of had a big advantage. They were 18 of 20. I think that's 90%. A major edge in a game where possession were at premium. These efficiencies allowed Kansas to control the tempo, really extend their lead when Houston attempted again to mount runs. Now, when you look at the Houston Cougars, holy smokes, ladies and gentlemen, it just did not go well for them. Kingston Flemings, who really is a talented basketball player, he led Houston with 16 points, going 6 of 18 from the floor and 3 of 3 from the line. Fleming's scoring threat really kept Houston at times. He was helping them kind of maintain a lead early in the first half, but that kind of fuel ran out. And one of the guys that typically would have a very solid basketball game just was non-existent. That's Emmanuel Sharp. He did add 5 points, but ladies and gentlemen, he was awful shooting tonight. He was 1 of 10 and 1 of 6 from the three. Really, I think what that kind of demonstrates is Kansas contested really the perimeter aspect. There were times where they got caught lacking, but for the most part, when Emmanuel Sharp does not perform, whether that was a lot of pressure from Allen Fieldhouse or they just schemed up Sharp extremely well, he typically is that shooting threat. He's a staple of the Houston offense. We talked about it in the pregame. But man, Kansas really contested a ton of his opportunities. They forced terrible shots, as you saw, and it's reflected in the box score. He just did not have a good game. And Chris Sinak Jr. contributed 9.7 rebounds, really showing effort inside and on the boards. But he just didn't have one of those premier games either. His size and rebounding were important for Houston's interior presence and really kind of allowed them to somewhat come back in this game. But they just never could mount anything and really kind of build momentum because the Kansas Jayhawks just found a way to keep pouring it on. Really my key takeaway, Kansas' 69-56 victory over Houston was a defining moment in the Big 12 race. And whether the Kansas Jayhawks will even be considered for the Big 12 title, I don't think that's still going to happen because of that Cincinnati loss. It's just the ability for the Jayhawks to impose their will at home, especially in high-pressure games like Big Monday. They showcase their championship ability. Meanwhile, the Cougars must regroup. They have to rediscover their offensive groove if they hope to rebound in final stretch of this conference play. This game will be remembered not only for the result, but for the way Kansas leaned into its strengths. Really, the primary thing was their defense, the balanced effort, the home court energy, and to defeat one of the league's elite squads just shows you that Kansas has the ability to play, honestly, step on the court with anybody. I appreciate y'all checking out this video. Make sure you guys smash that like button, smash that subscribe button, and I end every video the exact same way. Have a good day. Rock chalk, baby.